can speak. What? I got your gun.
Fans have spent 50 years watching Star Trek frame by frame, quoting Spock in their sleep and believing there was nothing left to discover. And yet hidden inside the most familiar episodes of the original series are details so small and so cleverly disguised that even the most devoted Trekkies walked right past them for decades. And by the time you reach the end of this, you will understand that the franchise's most enduring magic was never the technology or the aliens but the sheer resourcefulness of people working with almost nothing and convincing the entire world it was something extraordinary. Start with Montgomery Scott, the Enterprise's beloved chief engineer, played by Canadian actor James Doohan, who carried a secret on his own hand for the entire run of the show that almost nobody noticed at the time. Before he ever set foot on a soundstage, Doohan had served as a lieutenant in the Royal Canadian Artillery during the Second World War, and on June 6, 1944, he led his men across Juno Beach during the Normandy landings, where in the chaos of that single day he was struck by 6 bullets, 4 in his leg, 1 through his chest that would have killed him outright had a silver cigarette case in his pocket not deflected it, and 1 that took his right middle finger entirely. He carried that injury quietly into a television career that required hiding it constantly, and the production found ways around it without ever drawing attention to the work involved, favoring his left hand for on-screen activity, angling cameras to capture him from his unaffected side during engineering scenes, and occasionally bringing in a hand double for close-up shots when both hands needed to be visible. It is the kind of detail that hides in plain sight for half a century because nobody is looking for it, and once you know it, you cannot watch Scotty operate a control panel the same way again. The show's resourcefulness extended into its props in ways that are almost funnier the more you learn about them. The elegant alien liquor containers seen throughout the original series, most famously the Saurian brandy bottle, were not custom-built artifacts at all but repurposed 1964 commemorative George Dickel Tennessee whiskey bottles featuring a distinctive powder horn design, transformed into something extraterrestrial through minimal alteration, and these bottles have since become genuinely valuable collector's items sought after by both Star Trek enthusiasts and bourbon collectors, with sealed original examples now extremely rare. This was not an isolated trick. Salt shakers became Dr. McCoy's medical instruments, household appliances were reworked into technical equipment, and ordinary packaging materials became the control panels lining the Enterprise's corridors, a pattern of creative reuse that allowed the production to fill the screen with convincing alien technology without the budget to custom-build everything from scratch. Behind the cameras, the relationship between the 2 lead actors carried its own quiet tension, one written directly into the contracts. William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy's agreements contained a specific typographical clause stipulating that Nimoy's credit appear at no less than 75% of the size and type given to the show's billed star, a precise percentage that reflected a careful negotiation of status between the 2 men, and beginning with the 4th aired episode the production explicitly applied this rule, with internal documentation stating plainly that Nimoy's credit was to be no more than 75% of the type afforded to Shatner. This disparity sat inside a broader contractual structure known as a favored nations clause, designed to guarantee equal treatment between the 2 stars in pay and screen time, and the tension it represented did not stay confined to the original series, later surfacing when Shatner invoked the same clause to demand directorial opportunities after Nimoy had directed a film. Meanwhile, other cast members operated under looser arrangements entirely, with one internal memo noting that DeForest Kelley had received better credit treatment than the production was contractually required to provide him. The visual design of the Klingon, one of the franchise's most enduring and intimidating creations, hid an almost absurd material origin. During the first season episode featuring Klingon Commander Kor, the costume incorporated a painted strip of ordinary bubble wrap as a belt buckle, transformed through paint and careful placement into something that read as alien and militaristic rather than recognizably domestic. Costume designer Bill Tice later explained that this was not simply a budget-driven shortcut but a deliberate artistic choice, describing his general approach to futuristic costuming as taking ordinary materials and presenting them entirely out of context, and the bubble wrap's textured surface, properly treated, suggested an armor plating foreign enough that audiences never questioned its authenticity for decades. The first alien starship the Enterprise ever encountered carried a similarly humble construction. The Phasarius, which appeared in the Corbomite maneuver, was built from what production documents describe as a large ball covered in ping-pong balls cut in half and shot intentionally out of focus, designed by Matt Jeffries and constructed by Wachong according to purchase orders archived at UCLA, with some accounts describing a plaster of Paris shell as the underlying structure and dimmers added to make the model pulsate as though powered by genuine alien technology. The visual effects work proved so demanding that it ultimately prevented the episode from airing as the series premiered despite being intended for that slot, and decades later, when CBS Digital recreated the Phasarius as a CGI model for the remastered series, the effects team deliberately preserved the original silhouette while adding small details that visual effects supervisor Michael Okuda said probably should have been there from the beginning. One of the earliest and most enduring continuity errors in the franchise appears not in dialogue but on a tombstone. In the third episode of the original series, after Lieutenant Commander Gary Mitchell develops godlike powers and creates a grave for Captain Kirk, the inscription reads James R. Kirk, despite the fact that throughout the rest of the series his middle initial is consistently established as T, for Tiberius. The error was never corrected on screen, and even during the remastering process decades later, the visual effects team debated digitally altering the letter before deciding against it given the extensive rotoscope work required, leaving the explanation to come instead from creator Gene Roddenberry himself, who reportedly said simply that Gary Mitchell had godlike powers but was at base still human, and he made a mistake, which preserved both the continuity and the original footage without requiring any technical correction at all. The illusion of the Enterprise racing through open space relied on a process considerably more labor-intensive than most viewers ever imagined. The production used an Oxbury optical printer capable of complex reductions and enlargements with continuous automatic focusing, photographing a painted canvas of black stars on white background and tracking it in multiple directions using different mattis for each pass, superimposing these movements at varying speeds to create the sensation of faster-than-light travel, starting with roughly 500 stars and finishing with perhaps 30 visible on each pass, while stationary background. Stars were achieved by punching holes of varying sizes through large sheets of black paper backed with diffusion screens and color filters. A single ship flyby could consume an entire day of work, and scenes involving multiple ships with explosions and interactive lighting could stretch into a full week, which explains why this particular technique appeared relatively rarely across the series despite its visual impact. Occasionally, the Enterprise itself appeared to sail backward through space, at least from certain camera angles, with its registration numbers showing as mirror images rather than reading correctly. This was not always accidental. Visual effects teams sometimes intentionally flipped footage horizontally to generate new usable shots without additional filming costs, particularly when Earth or other unwanted elements had crept into the background of otherwise serviceable footage, and the resulting mirrored image, with the NCC 1701 designation reading backward on the saucer section or nacelle pylon, slipped past most audiences for decades until dedicated fans began examining the registry markings closely enough to notice. The arrowhead insignia worn on Kirk's uniform, one of the most recognizable symbols in science fiction, was not originally meant to represent the whole of Starfleet at all but specifically identified crew serving aboard the Enterprise. Careful viewers can spot distinct emblems whenever personnel from other vessels appear throughout the original series, with the USS Exeter crew wearing a circle pierced by a spike and the Defiant featuring a hollow delta without the familiar starburst background, reflecting Roddenberry's own military background and his understanding of how unit insignias actually function. It was only after the success of the original 5-year mission that Starfleet Command, within the show's internal continuity, adopted the Enterprise's arrowhead as the standard symbol for the entire organization, a transition that became visible between the original series and the first feature film, and subsequent productions maintained this consistency with appropriate variations, while the prequel series Enterprise deliberately avoided the arrowhead altogether in favor of a distinct oval emblem appropriate to its earlier timeline. In one of the stranger crossovers in television production history, the same backlit streets that Sheriff Andy Taylor patrolled in his small fictional town became alien landscapes and historical settings for Star Trek, with the Mayberry set transformed into a ghost town inhabited by children in one episode and into 1930s New York City when Kirk and Spock traveled back in time in another. Star Trek's cameras revealed the full height of buildings that the Andy Griffith show typically framed to appear single-story, and guest star Joan Collins later recalled reporting to the very soundstage where NBC filmed its small-town comedy. Attentive viewers can spot Floyd's barbershop sign in the background of these episodes, along with the Mayberry Hotel shown in full view without its usual railing and the courthouse and drugstore visible from angles their home series never used. a practical solution born from one episode running significantly over budget, requiring the director to film at pre-established NBC studios and conduct extended day and night shooting sessions to demonstrate fiscal responsibility to network executives. Throughout the corridors of the Enterprise, observant viewers might notice pipes and conduits labeled with a mysterious acronym, GNDN, which according to one of the original set designers stood plainly for Goes Nowhere, Does Nothing, a practical joke identifying purely decorative set pieces with no functional purpose, complete with its own internal color-coded labeling system to maintain the appearance of authenticity. The joke became affectionately known among crew as Gundans and eventually transcended the original series entirely, with the Deep Space Nine crew deliberately including GNDN pipes as a quiet homage when they rebuilt Enterprise sets for a 30th anniversary tribute episode, even as some fans insist they have never actually spotted the markings in the original footage. Production errors slipped into the final broadcast more often than most casual viewers realize. In the third episode of the first season, a boom microphone visibly drifts into frame during a pivotal scene roughly 6 minutes in and remains visible across several shots, a persistent hazard of filming on confined sets with multiple camera angles before the editing tools existed to catch every mistake before broadcast. The same episode contains several additional oversights, including visible floor marks indicating where actors were meant to stand and tape markers left in frame to guide blocking, the kind of human fingerprint that fan communities have since turned into an entire subgenre of appreciation, with dedicated websites cataloging these glimpses behind the curtain not as flaws but as evidence of a hard-working crew building something extraordinary under genuine constraints. Similar glimpses appear scattered across other early episodes, with lighting stands and stage rigging visible at the edges of certain frames, electrical cables snaking across studio floors, and in one particularly tense shuttlecraft episode the edge of the set itself becoming visible behind an actor mid-scene, along with a blue backdrop showing through a doorway and a spear strike sending visible styrofoam chips flying through the air in a moment that instantly reveals an alien world to be a studio set. The challenges only deepened decades later when the original series was prepared for remastering, since unlike contemporary shows that could access original camera negatives, Star Trek's effects team had only 35mm master prints available, eliminating any possibility of widescreen conversion and forcing the team to balance preserving authenticity against improving visual quality, using only what already existed. Perhaps the most charming of these unintended glimpses appears in the episode marking the first appearance of the Klingon, where an unpainted piece of raw lumber sits clearly visible directly beneath Spock during a tense confrontation, and later a section of unfinished wood with visible gray paint drip marks appears at the bottom of the frame as the Enterprise returns fire. These were never errors the production wanted, but they became, almost by accident, part of what gave the show its distinctive minimalist aesthetic, an austere and efficient visual style that kept attention locked on the characters rather than elaborate scenery, proving that imagination filled in every gap the budget could not, and that the universe Star Trek built across 5 decades of cultural influence was never really made of latex and plywood and repurposed whiskey bottles at all, but of the relentless ingenuity of people determined to make something feel infinite with almost nothing in their hands.